Welcome on in to This Week in Big Sky Basketball, sponsored by Jimmy John's. I'm your host, Denise Thompson. It's been a wild race for the regular season title in Big Sky Basketball for both the men and the women. Our guests today include Northern Arizona's Debisschop, Portland State women's head coach, Lynn Kennedy, and Colter Nuanez of Skyline Sports. First, let's take a look at what's been happening in Big Sky men's basketball. Montana continued to remain atop the Big Sky men's standing last week, sneaking out a 4-point victory over Idaho and Missoula to improve to 6-1 in league play. Following in behind the Grizz are three teams with a 4-2 record in Eastern Washington, Northern Colorado, and Southern Utah. The Eagles climbed back up the standings with road wins over Idaho and Montana State behind the play of junior guard Jacob Davidson, who averaged 21.5 points on the week. Northern Colorado and Southern Utah each suffered their second loss in conference play, but defeated Sacramento State handily to remain in the top four of the standings. 26 of the 36 conference games so far have been decided by single digits, with 13 of those being within 3 points. Northern Arizona put together a strong weekend on the road, defeating Northern Colorado and Southern Utah. A key part of the Lumberjack success was senior forward Debisschop, who averaged 12.5 points and 9 boards per game. Brooks now joins us on the show. How are you doing today, Brooks?
Not too bad. Just having some early lunch and then getting ready to go into campus and get treatment and then go to class. So
the life of a student athlete.
Exactly.
All right. So your team pulled off a couple nail-biters last weekend on the road. What did you do that executed so well in order to come away with those wins?
Yeah, I think it's just playing together and believing in one another. We're always going to be better as a team, and no individual can do it on their own. So, I just think the fact that we work so well together and believe in one another is a big reason for our success.
Those pair of wins now, propels you to a big 4-game homestand. Talk about the momentum that gives you knowing you'll be at home for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, obviously we always like to protect home court, and so it'd be really nice to take those 2 wins and then bring it into a nice little 4-game homestand and see if we can continue the streak and get things rolling.
Your numbers have improved in your senior season. What has been your main focus during the offseason to become such a greater asset for your team this year?
I think trying to be able to score the ball at the post. In years past, I was more of probably a facilitator rather than a scorer. So just trying to be able to put the ball in the basket. And I credit our head coach, Coach Burkhardt, for allowing me to get the ball down there and do things with it and believing in me. And also one of our assistant coach, Ojanen, who works with me every day on working on post moves and skill work and things like that.
You mentioned Shane Burkhardt, as NAU made that coaching change prior to the start of the season. What has that transition been like for you and for your teammates?
I think it's worked out really well. Obviously I have a lot of respect for Coach Murphy, and he brought me in, and I was with him for 3 years, and was sad to see him go. But when they announced that Coach Burkhardt was going to be our head coach, it wasn't like taking a step back. We were planning on hitting the ground running and moving forward and trying to have a really successful season. So.
You were named an academic All-American last season, the first in the Big Sky in 4 years. Talk about what that honor meant to you.
It was a huge honor for myself, the school, obviously, my family, grandmas, aunts and uncles, parents, all were really excited about that. And I just think it was cool to be recognized for a lot of hard work in the classroom and on the court, and it was really an honor to be able to receive that award.
You're a finance major carrying close to a perfect 4.0 GPA. What made you decide to get that major, and what do you plan to do with it once you're done with college and playing basketball in your career?
When I came in, I elected to go like general business, and wasn't really sure what focus I would choose. And then after my freshman year, in the finance class that I had, I was interested in it and enjoy that side of things, the math and more money side of things versus like marketing or things like that. I don't really know what I want to do after I graduate for sure. I obviously like to keep playing basketball if I can professionally, and then either a job in finance or maybe coaching. I've been thinking about that as well. So not quite sure what I'm going to do yet, but.
Sounds like you have some pretty good choices. Well, thank you, Brooks, for joining us on the show today. We appreciate it, and best of luck with the rest of the season.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. That's Northern Arizona senior forward Brooks Debisschop. We'll take a short break, then we'll be back with Portland State head coach Lynn Kennedy and to discuss what's been going on in Big Sky women's basketball. That's all coming up when we return on This Week in Big Sky Basketball.
Need a hotel for work or just a night away? With over 50 hotels open and more on the way, we want to be your home away from home. My Place Hotels is proud to be the official hotel of the Big Sky Conference.
Welcome back to This Week in Big Sky Basketball. I'm your host, Denise Thompson. The 2020 Big Sky Men's and Women's Basketball Championships presented by My Place Hotels are back in Boise, Idaho in March. Visit BigSkyInBoise.com to purchase tickets and get hotel information. The Big Sky Conference will take over Boise March 9th through the 14th, and we want to see you there. Now, let's take a look at what's happening in Big Sky women's basketball. Montana State sits at the top of the conference standings after surviving a double overtime scare on Saturday against Eastern Washington. The Eagles and Bobcats fought to the final second with Montana State escaping with an 89-85 victory to improve to 6-1 in conference play. Close behind Montana State at 5-1 is last season's regular season champion, Idaho. The Vandals are the only team this season to get the best of the Bobcats so far. Idaho is on a 3-game win streak after picking up wins against Eastern Washington and Montana. Northern Arizona continues to rise in the conference rankings as it sits at 5-2 in conference play to extend their win streak to 5 games over the weekend. Also rising in the standings is last year's tournament winner, Portland State. The Vikings are in 4th with a 5-3 record and are on a 3-game winning streak. Now joining us to talk about their recent success on the hardwood is Portland State head coach Lynn Kennedy. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So conference play started a little slow for Portland State, but now things seem to be trending in the right direction with you picking up wins in 5 of your last 6 games. What has been the key to your recent success?
Well, I think, going into conference play, we're a young team, as are a lot of, Big Sky teams this year. And so I think just kind of figuring out Big Sky Conference on the road and just coming off of the break too as well, the Christmas break, it was a quick turnaround. So, I think we figured it out after that first weekend, and then we turned around and had Idaho at home, and we were able to kind of regroup after that road trip. And I thought we played a really good game against Idaho and came away with a win. And since then, we've just kind of been getting better every day and looking, to this last weekend, that next road trip where we kind of had to put it together. And Idaho State's always a tough team, and we've had a little bit of trouble against them in the past. But I thought we had a great first quarter, and we were able to, get a lead. And they made a good, second quarter push and take the lead at halftime. But I loved our third quarter and our intensity and able to put together a complete game that game and ended up getting the road sweep last night against Weber State. So I like where we're at as a young team, and we're progressing and getting better. And now we have another quick turnaround Thursday against Sac State.
The thought process is that your non-conference play prepares you for conference play. And when we look back at your non-conference slate, you had a home game against Tennessee that sticks out to fans. How were you able to get the Volunteers to make the trip to your home court?
It was a couple years in the making. I think that they usually have a West Coast swing where they're playing a Pac-12 team, and it just happened that they had a return against Stanford. They had one of their players that was from Salem, and so I think they were trying to, get closer to her home and play in front of her family and friends. And she actually was not on the team when they came. She transferred before they were able to get out here. But it was kind of a combination of both. And, we haven't shied away from playing, Power 5 teams. We played Ole Miss at home a couple years ago, and we were able to get a win against them. So I think for us, we'll play anybody, anytime, anywhere. And even playing in the WNIT preseason tournament, coming off our success last year, that was a great experience for us, even though we didn't get the wins we wanted to. But playing, teams like Tennessee, just their tradition and who they are as a team, I think that was great for our team to go through that. And, we had a great couple quarters, and, we had the second quarter, we got in foul trouble. But other than that, I liked our effort against them, and you can see now what they're doing in the SEC play, that they're doing really well. So I think for us, getting ready for Big Sky Conference, it was a success to play against them.
So you return a couple key players from last year's squad, and one name that sticks out is Kylie Jimenez. How does having an experienced player as Kylie in the backcourt help you as a coach?
Just having another leader on the floor. We have
some experienced players now with a younger team. And so I think just having her as kind of another leader, a coach on the floor who knows our system, our philosophy, what we want to get out of every possession, whether it's offense or defense, and she can step up in that moment. She doesn't have to score every game. She doesn't have to, lead by assist, but, just her complete game, whether it's defense, offense. I think that's what, our younger players are looking for her to kind of guide them as, as they go through this season. So she's just been great and getting better every year, and just her off-season workouts have been unbelievable. Just her work ethic and what she puts into the off-season, and just to see her growth this last year has been exciting, and then to watch her play this year. So we look for great things for her, as we finish up the conference season.
Another name that pops off the box score is sophomore Desiree Hansen. Talk a little bit about her development from last year to now.
I think, last year, hitting that big shot to win the Big Sky Conference tournament, I think she was put in the spotlight a little bit sooner than she wanted to as a freshman, but she was able to handle it great, and, during the off season. And I think going into this year, we just put a lot of work into developing other parts of her game and just not relying on her shot. And she's done a great job of getting to the basket. We saw that last night. She was able to get fouled and get to the free throw line. And she went 4 from 4 from the field, and I think she was 9 for 9 from the free throw line. So just a complete perfect game as far as shooting. And the other part of her game is just defensively, just starting to be better defensively. But it's a different role this year. Last year, she was able to come off the bench and kind of be our third, fourth, or fifth option. Now she's our first, second, or third. And so it changes her kind of middle approach to the game and what's expected of her. And she's embraced that, and she's done a great job of just the mental part of the game, being prepared for each and every game.
The race to be crowned Big Sky champion is a tight one right now. What will it take to claim that title again this season?
Well, I think it's crazy to look at the standings and just see, from top to bottom. I think Montana State, definitely is playing well. Idaho's playing well, and so you look at the standings and you can see, a lot of young teams in the Big Sky Conference this year. So I think probably number one is the team that stays healthy throughout the conference season, a team that's playing their best basketball in March. I think when you get into March, a lot of it is, who you play. And so seeding is going to play a lot this year as far as who we're playing and what, matchups that we draw. So it's exciting to look forward to. I think, we've got a lot of games yet to play, and, things can change pretty quickly in the Big Sky Conference. But for us, we just got to take each game and focus on Sac State Thursday. And I think as you see the standings and see the teams and know that people have beat, people, whether it's at home or away. And so we've got to be ready for those games, regardless if they're home or away. And we know that anybody can beat anybody at any time in the Big Sky Conference.
Knowing that, how do you keep your team focused on one game at a time?
Well, I going into this, with the Lone Wolf schedule, I wasn't sure how it would play out, but I think we're playing games so rapidly, the quick turnarounds, we don't really have time to think about things as much as last year when you had a week in between almost every week. And so for us this year, it's been good to kind of get back in the gym right away. We played last night, get back in for some shots today, refocus, get ready for Sac State. You don't have time to think about standings or teams or who's beating who as far as players go. And so I think that's been good for us as a young team to kind of refocus right away and get ready for the next team that we have. And so we can't look too far ahead. I think we just got to keep progressing and getting better as a young team. And I like where we're at right now.
All right, Coach, we appreciate you joining us on the show today, and best of luck of the rest of the season. That's Portland State head coach Lynn Kennedy.
Thank you so much.
When we come back, we'll preview the week ahead in the Big Sky Conference. We'll also have a visit from Colter Nuanez of Skyline Sports. We'll also note where you can find Big Sky games on TV this weekend. Stay with us. You're listening to This Week in Big Sky Basketball.
Dinner's great. It's one of your top 3 favorite meals. You just don't want to have to make it. Well, with Jimmy John's, you don't have to. Whether you live in a sandwich delivery zone or head into the store, you can always get a freaky fresh sandwich. Click to order at jimmyjohns.com.
Welcome back to the final segment of this week's episode of This Week in Big Sky Basketball. I'm Denise Thompson. The Big Sky Conference airs all of its live stream sporting events on Pluto TV for free, including up to 700 football, men's and women's basketball, volleyball, and selected soccer, softball, and track and field events. Watch online at www.plutotv or download the app. All Big Sky basketball games can be seen on Watch Big Sky and Pluto TV. On the women's side, Montana and Montana State host Weber State and Idaho State. Southern Utah and Northern Colorado will face off against Eastern Washington and Idaho. Portland State will host Sacramento State and Northern Arizona will also play at Sacramento State. In men's action, Weber State and Idaho State will host Montana and Montana State. Idaho and Eastern Washington will welcome Southern Utah and Northern Colorado to town, while Northern Arizona will host Sacramento State and Portland State. Portland State will also play at Sacramento State this week. All right, it's time to welcome in Colter Nuanez of Skyline Sports. Colter, how are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an exciting time in Big Sky basketball right now, and for the men, the top 4 teams created a little separation in the standings last week. Do you see those 4 staying out in front, or do you see someone else sneaking in and contending for the title?
Well, I think that Portland State has been inconsistent, but some of that has been injuries, and they got Sal Nuhu back last night, and they destroyed Weber State. And so when he's back, he's such a game changer. He's one of the best shot blockers in the league. He's kind of the head of the snake on that press that Portland State runs. So Portland State being alone in 5th, they might be able to play their way into that conversation as being a seeded team. I still don't know what I think of Southern Utah, because I think that Southern Utah has a tremendous amount of talent, but they've had a hard time finding consistency. I think they're still kind of figuring out their roles. But then I think that there's a different dynamic between Eastern Washington, Montana, and Northern Colorado. I think that maybe the league expected Montana to be a little bit down this year after losing 5 seniors from a year ago, but that hasn't been the case, and the Grizz are really embracing sort of the us against the world attitude. People didn't really think they were going to be in a position to lead the league, and here they are leading the league. So I always think that's a pretty interesting motivational factor. And Northern Colorado, same thing. They lose Jordan Davis, second all-time leading scorer in conference history, but they got dudes that can lead, especially Jonah Radaba. I think he is one of the best leaders, one of the best two-way players in the league. But then on the other side of the coin, you got Eastern Washington going through what the Grizz went through the last 2 years, where when you're the league favorite and everybody knows you have all the top returners, you're going to get everybody's best shot every night. I think Eastern's done well so far in handling that pressure, but it is a distinct pressure and definitely different motivation than maybe Northern Colorado and Montana have. So I think that right now I don't really think there is much separation in the league, because even though there is this top 5, Montana State could play their way in there. I mean, Northern Arizona just swept this last weekend with a win over Northern Colorado. So I think there's still a lot to be decided. And obviously Weber State, they've been really banged up. Garrett Hardy being in and out of the lineup. But Weber State being 2-5, you're not used to that. You're not used to seeing Weber at the bottom of the league standing. So they might be able to play their way back in to the mix as well. So to answer your question, Denise, I think it's still pretty wide open. I honestly think there's 10 teams in this league that can contend for top 4 spots. So as deep as the league's ever been, certainly.
Well, that definitely goes into the next question, which you just really don't have an answer, which is, who do you think is a dark horse? You mentioned Portland State a little bit right after, around the 5 spot. You just brought up Northern Arizona having some pretty good wins, Montana State, Weber State. Is there really a dark horse, or is it just that comparable this year?
Honestly, I think that the dark horse is Idaho. I watched Idaho and Missoula on Saturday night, and you look at the Vandals. They've only won 1 league game. They're 1-5. But they've lost those 5 games by a combined 13 points. I mean, their 4-point loss in Missoula on Saturday was the worst conference loss that they've had. That's the biggest margin of victory they've suffered. They've lost by 1 twice. They've lost by 2 twice. So it's crazy how close they've been. I mean, they're literally in the game until the final 30 seconds every time. And when you have a roster with 10 guys that are brand new to it, it takes a while to learn how to finish games. But I do think they have one of the premier players in the league in Trayvon Allen. And I think they have a bunch of other guys that are really hungry that just really want to play hard. I mean, their effort was on par with Montana. Montana has won with their effort for 3 years now. And Idaho matched that effort. I was very impressed by that. So I think when you have a really strong leader like Trayvon Allen and then a bunch of other guys finding their roles, I mean, watch out. I mean, imagine if the Vandals figured out how to win these close games, all of a sudden they could rip off 3, 4, 5 wins in a row. So we'll see. But I think that they're definitely one. And then the other is probably the other team with the new coach. That's NAU. To me, they just got to be healthy. When Bernie Andre and Cam Shelton are both going, and Adonovich is shooting, and he provides a lot of problems, a lot of matchup problems. So they could be a team that can sneak up on some people as well. But I mean, it just seems like there's so many teams that certain things, if it goes well for them, they can be contenders. So I think that there is quite a few teams that could play their way into that dark horse role before we get to Boise.
Well, I think you just said it, not to jump too far ahead, but you're pretty much telling us that it's going to be a pretty good championship in Boise in March.
Absolutely. Yes, I think it's going to be great because not only, last couple of years the league has been really good at the top. I don't think the league is as good at the top just because there's not the all-time players like Jordan Davis, like Tyler Hall, like Ahmad Rory, Michael Oguine. Those guys were some of the best players I've seen in my 15 years covering the league. But I think the games that are kind of the earlier in the week games are going to be such highly contested games. It's going to be all about matchups because when we get down to that point in the season, the difference between the 4th and the 8th or the 5th and the 10th place teams isn't going to be that much. These teams are so even. And so you might see teams just jockeying for position to get the right matchup in the first and second rounds. So I think that there's going to be all sorts of intriguing matchups when we get to Boise. No doubt the crossover is going to be really fun to watch.
Okay, you mentioned some highlighted players that you've been able to cover over the years, and it seems like it'll be a close race for the Big Sky MVP this year. Who are a couple players that you think have really improved their game this season to compete for that honor?
Well, I think that one guy that maybe was on nobody's preseason watch list that's been absolutely lights out 7 games in here has been Kendall Manuel at Montana. And he's got a great story. I mean, he's an in-state kid. There's not a lot of D1 kids that come out of the state of Montana. But he played at Oregon State for Wayne Tinkle, former Montana coach, and then transferred back to Montana in hopes of being, a star guy out of the Pac-12. And last year he really bit the bullet and took a role as the 6th man. And he was the top reserve in the Big Sky, newcomer of the year in the Big Sky. But he was the 5th, 6th scoring option. He was not the go-to guy. And then this year in the non-conference, he struggled tremendously. I mean, he was shooting less than 25% from 3 coming into league play, shooting less than 40% from the floor. And then for whatever reason, he had a film session with Travis DeCure, and he locked in. And over these last 6 games, he's shooting 50+% from both the field and from 3. He's the best free throw shooter in the conference besides probably Harold Frey. And, if he could go out on top like that, if he continues his shooting splits, if he averages 20 points a game and shoots over 50% from the floor and from 3 as a jump shooter like he is, well, I don't know if it's sustainable, but if he does, he's definitely got to be the MVP. I mean, it would be a historic season, not only in the Big Sky, but in college basketball. But other guys that have really jumped out, I mean, I think that Jacob Davidson's really proving his worth. He was out last year down the stretch for Eastern. I think that really hurt them. But he was great in Bozeman on Saturday, had 26 points against Montana State. I think Mason Peatling is up there in the MVP conversation out of Eastern as well. It depends on where the Cats go from here, but Harold Frey for the Bobcats, he could really – I think he is probably one of the most talented players in the league and probably the guy who has the best future as a pro. And I think that, turning the corner for him could be crucial. And we'll see. I mean, if Idaho can start winning those close games, Trayvon Allen has the statistics to be up there as well. And then I mentioned Jonah Radaba. I mean, I think the fact that he's scoring at a high clip, but also he's the best on-ball defensive player in the entire league, he could be in the conversation as well, particularly because of his leadership. And just depending on how it plays out for Northern Colorado, he could be in the mix as well.
Ooh, that's a lot of names. Okay, let's move over to the women's side for a little bit. It seems like there's a race for the top seed that remains pretty tight. How do you see that playing out as the season goes on?
Well, Montana State, I thought, really showed a lot of fortitude on Saturday, pulling out a double overtime win against a pretty spunky Eastern Washington team. I mean, Montana State's found a lot of ways to win. I mean, they've outscored people. They've been great on offense. They've also been able to lock down on defense. And now they're proving they can win close games, too. I think that Trisha Binford's been building this thing for a while, and now she has the perfect combination. She's got 5 seniors who all know how to play together, but then she also has Darren White, who is, in my mind, is the front runner for freshman of the year so far. And she's an incredibly poised and competitive point guard. She reminds me a lot of Erica Perry, who was the first great point guard that Coach Binford brought to Montana State about a decade ago. And so if Darren White could continue that pace of play, she's going to be really good. But I do think that as long as John Dew leaves at Idaho, Idaho's always going to be in the mix. And even with losing Michaela Ferenz and Taylor Pierce, they really just stayed locked in. And they had a good win over Montana. on Saturday. And, so to me, I think Montana State, Idaho, I think they're kind of top two front runners, but Portland State's been better than I expected, even though they lost such a decorated senior class. Idaho State, always competitive with Seton Sobolewski, so a little bit more of the common names there. And we'll see. I mean, the Lady Grizz, to me, are the X factor here because they've been good early, but then they've also looked they've really struggled as of late. And so we'll see how Shannon Schwain's team can turn the corner. They do have a little bit more veteran players than everybody else and a lot of other teams in the league, but we'll see. We'll see where they go because I think that it's a huge year for Missoula. They really need to take the next step because the program's been down since Robin Selvig retired, and it's definitely a pivotal year in the arc of the program. So we'll see how Montana figures into the mix, but I do think that Montana State right now has definitely established themselves as the front runner.
Okay, so Northern Arizona's on a 5-game win streak. Lori Payne sees it has them doing really well right now. What is it going to take for the Lumberjacks to keep this success up?
I think they just have to not get complacent with the success. I think Lori Payne's a great coach. I was very impressed with her first year, how hard she had those girls playing, and then they took a good step forward last year, and then this year they've taken the next step, and then she brought in some good transfers. They're athletic, they can shoot it. They play really, really hard, which is going to get you a long ways in this league, especially when you're playing on the road. So I think that Lori Payne has done a tremendous job. She is definitely an up-and-coming coach in this league. It was a great hire by NAU, and the fact now that they've got it rolling a little bit, I think they just got to not be satisfied. If they can just continue to harness that momentum and keep it going forward, they could definitely be a team that plays into the mix as well.
You've touched on a few things up and down, but what do you think is the biggest surprise this far as we're 1 month into conference play?
Wow, I'm not exact. I mean, I think that honestly, I think the emerging players on both sides has been very interesting to watch. It's funny how this stuff ebbs and flows, but the last couple years, we've just had absolutely historic players on both sides. I mean, I mentioned all those guys on the men's side, but then on the women's side too. I mean, Michaela Friends and Taylor Pierce are two of the greatest shooters I think that we'll ever see. I mean, you're not going to really find two teammates that make 400 plus threes in their careers together alongside each other, let alone Michaela Friends breaking the all-time scoring record. I mean, it is amazing to watch those girls. And then Savannah Smith from Northern Colorado, she's absolutely one of the best players the Big Sky has seen as well. And so I was just so interested coming into this year what the quality of the league would be like and who could emerge as stars. But it seems as if there's players across the league that really have embraced that, whether it's Gina Markson at Idaho or the Klinker sisters Idaho or Mackenzie Johnson at Montana, Oleana Squires, Fallon Frigie at Montana State. I mean, there's been a lot of girls that have stepped up, and it's been the same thing on the guys' side. I think that Jonah Radabaugh is a real star now. Trayvon Allen, real star. Harold Frey, a real star. So I think that's been probably my biggest surprise is just the fact that there's been so many emergent players after the league lost a lot of really, really storied stars from the last couple of years.
All right, fans, that's Colter Nuanez of Skyline Sports. Thanks for joining us today, Colter.
Thank you so much for having me. I'll talk to you guys next week.
Special thanks to our guests today, Northern Arizona's Brooks Debisschop, Portland State women's head coach Lynn Kennedy, and Skyline Sports Colter Nuanez. I'm Denise Thompson saying enjoy this week in Big Sky basketball.